Okay, let's make some art today. Let's see. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Markowsky, and today we are going to be making a painting by another one of my very, very favorite artists. This time we're going all the way onto the other side of the planet to help celebrate Pakistan's independence. It happened on August 14th, 1947. And so we're going to look at it, probably, I think, one of the best Pakistani artists in history, Molka Ahmed. And let's take a look at the painting we're going to make today. Where did I put it? There we go. So this is the painting we're going to make today. This is the portrait of Sufi Waqar, and I love this portrait. There's something both very simple about it, and there's a lot of like quiet intensity in this man, kind of staring intensely into off camera, outside of the picture. What is he looking at? What's he thinking? This particular person, this man, was a student of Molka Ahmed's when she was a teacher at the Punjab University of Punjab, where she established what ultimately became the College of Fine Arts. And we'll talk about her role as a teacher and an administrator, because really she is ultimately responsible for she's often acknowledged as the pioneer of art in Pakistan, or at least of modern art, and particularly bringing Western art styles to Pakistan. So I thought possibly, depending on how we go with time, we may be able to also paint this picture, which is a painting of the College of Fine Arts in Punjab, where because she basically established that department in what ultimately became a separate school itself. And so this is a portrait of, or a landscape, I guess, that features this place that is both really important to her and also to tens of thousands of students over the past 70 or so years. So let's dive right into it. You ready to make a painting? Okay, so if we go back to, this is the actual painting we're going to do. There is an outline of the painting, which I have already done. I did this on Procreate did it on my iPad using the app Procreate. So I just traced the image out, and then I'm going to transfer it onto the canvas. I'm going to show you how I did that. I also have a version of the Department of Fine Arts here, and the outline here. So I've transferred that onto canvas. So I'm going to show you how I do these, both of them, really quickly off the top, and so you get an idea of how you can do this yourself. So I'm going to just sort of zip through some of this and talk over top of it while it's playing here. So you see that I'm painting on these 9x12 sized canvases. Here's the image. I just printed out on my inkjet printer here at home. I prefer just thicker paper in general, but photocopy paper will do just fine, if not actually better than the thicker paper, the kind of cardstock that I'm using, because you don't have to press so hard with your pencils. You can see I put the image roughly in the center, and there's the carbon paper that I use. You can use the same sheet of carbon paper over and over and over again, which is one of the great things with carbon paper. You can see it's been used many times there already. And then I like to use a colored pencil. You could use a pen as well. I like using a red or a blue just so I can see the pencil lines that I've already done, so I don't get confused as to if I've missed anything. So let's just kind of zip forward here. Probably took, well, I don't know, actually I could probably see pretty closely. About 5 minutes to do that. I'm I'm not getting every single little fold in the drawing. You can see even the face. There's a few little things with the eyes. I'm not looking to get it perfect. I just want to make sure I have kind of the major details in there. Great. Am I done here? I can't remember. There we are. Peel it off. You can recycle that tape. I'm also going to just, let's zip back here in time. And again, here's another 9 by 12 sized canvas. This time, yeah. I thought I was going to do landscape, but I forgot this is this way. There's the image. Same sort of thing. Roughly in the center. Put some tape on it. Sometimes I use a ruler to straighten it. I think with this one I did move it a little bit further down so that I might have a little bit of extra space at the top there for some sky, just to kind of balance it out a little bit. But you can certainly position it whichever way you want. There you can really see how often that carbon paper has been used. And then let's just zip ahead here because it's pretty self-explanatory. Boom, 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 boom. And there we are. Right, so now you've got both images on your canvas and you're ready to make a painting. So here's the images themselves. All right, there's one, and there's two. So I'm going to get them both prepped at the same time, since the way that I like to get these paintings started. Actually, if you're wondering, how do I get that template, Michael? Before I launch into this, I want to show you where the template is found so that you can download it yourself. There is a Dropbox link in the description below. You'll see all of these different folders in here for some of the most famous artists of all time. Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa, for instance. Georgia O'Keeffe here. Jacob Lawrence, we did a baseball-themed painting there. Robert Bateman, Learn How to Paint an Eagle. We did Batman, Star Wars. We've got a Superman, Peppa Pig. We've got another hockey player, Tom Thompson, who's probably the most famous Canadian artist of all time. Some Western-themed ones here. We did a whole week on Van Gogh and Spider-Man just the other day. So here we are, Anna Molka Ahmed, and then you can see there's more paintings coming down here in the future. So once you click in the Anna Molka Ahmed, you'll see there's 6 files in here, and those 6 files, you have your original image, and then you have 2 versions of the template. You have a JPEG and a PDF. You also have the other painting, the Department of Fine Arts here, and then 2 versions of the outline, a JPEG and a PDF. So that's why there's 6 files in there. The PDF and JPEG are interchangeable. There is a private Facebook group just for people who are painting along with me, and you can upload your version of today's painting, or paintings, if you do them both, to the Facebook group so that we can look at them. I can give you feedback every couple of, well, every month I do a session where I gather all of the paintings together and we take a look at them, and I congratulate people. I also offer little tips and suggestions on how to make them even better. So here's Paula's version of the Spider-Man one that we did just the other day. There's Van Gogh. There's this is the Carl Rungus landscape we did. Ooh, Susan's working on a Cezanne. I love that. Cool. So there's lots of really cool things in there. Let's maybe just take a quick second to look at the artist in question here, Anna Molka Ahmed. Born in 1917 and died in 1994, so age 76. She lived a pretty good long life. she was originally born as a Jewish child to Jewish parents in London, England, and her original name was Molly Bridger. She converted to Islam at age 18 while she was a student at St. Martin's College of Art in London. So she started training to become an artist. And while she was there, she met a fellow there, this guy, and they got married. And after, let's see, they moved to Lahore, Pakistan in 1940. And while she was there, there was an invitation for somebody to help set up a department at the university to teach women how to make art. And so she applied for the job, and she got the job. So she set up this department that was purely, at that stage, only for women. And like a lot of women-only programs throughout history, it was intended really to develop women into kind of good wives, to give them a kind of a hobby. So it was mostly focused on crafting, like quilting and sewing, that kind of thing. But she was a real artist, and she had wanted none of that. She was like, well, I mean, there was a place for it, but she thought, like, I really want to teach these women how to become real artists. And so she went about doing that, and ultimately elevated that program to the point where it was hard to ignore how great the artists the students that were coming out of that program were. And just about 5 or 6 years after that, the program was opened up to men as well. So she is acknowledged as the founder of art education at the university level in Pakistan. And she devoted most of the latter period of her life towards the administration and the running of that program, and ultimately that college, really, and sacrificed a lot of her own artistic ambitions and career towards that goal. But she's really fondly remembered in Pakistan for her contributions, for really opening up the doors to women for art education, but also to men as well, because there wasn't really a serious program for even men to study fine art in Pakistan. So she had it's almost hard to imagine the importance of this person in creating this like space for people to train seriously as a career to make art and to engage with the broader global art world. So her husband and her got divorced in 1951, and he moved, I think, to either United States or to England. And yet she stayed in Pakistan for the rest of her life and raised her daughters there. So there's lots of stuff we could talk about with her work. I just want to show maybe some images just so you get a quick little brief idea. Obviously we're going to make a couple of paintings. Another big thing that she did was she took her students outside to paint in plein air painting, painting outside the studio, which was also a big deal in Pakistan. Traditionally, like, Pakistani art is, we have a lot of pattern design, a lot of miniature painting, and, very studio-centric focused, like people working at tables or at easels, and, again, like very, very small, highly detailed artwork. Whereas her artwork, taking people outside the studio, that in itself is a big deal. Painting what you see, and you have to paint quickly when you're painting outside. So, and painting the landscapes as you see them, trying to incorporate and mix all those colors. Those are all very difficult tasks in and of themselves, but they're also radically different than the kind of art that was being made by most people in Pakistan at the time. So it's really hard to imagine what, you know, the actual impact that this person had on an entire culture. If we just keep on, how come I can't close that? Oh, there we go. Her work was done primarily with the palette knife, right? So we're going to use the palette knife for much of today's paintings, and which gives it this very thick impasto quality. Impasto is really just the use of thick, wet paint to create a great deal of texture. And so this is going to be fun because we have used the palette knife a few times, but I think almost exclusively for abstract painting. So this is going to be something very different. It's going to be a challenge for me because typically, as I've said in the past, I use the palette knife mostly for mixing on a palette, because that's what it's for, palette knife, right? For mixing on the palette. So, you know, even again, here's her sort of just changing. I mean, it's almost like she just like, what is the conditions of art in Pakistan right now? Well, I'm going to do everything differently, right? That is the mind of an artist right there. Just like every single established concept of what art should be, she radically changed it all. So let's see. So anyway, let's get right to the painting and start making these here. So I'm going to take these tracings and I'm going to put them aside. We won't need them for the rest of the day. Although maybe when we start getting, you know, pretty wild with the paint, we might want to refer to them just to help give us some guidance. They're really fun for like kids to paint on or draw on or color. You basically have like a coloring book right there should you choose to print them out. Okay, so I've put here some warm yellow, and for those of you that are just watching me for the very first time, and about 70 to 80% of the people watching this video are watching me for the very first time, and you're wondering, what is this color? What are we doing? In every episode in the past, I've talked about all of this kind of ad nauseum, but there is links to this particular paint and the paints that I use for every single class in the video description below. So check those out. You can buy the exact ones I use, but you don't need them. I made a video about a year ago that's called, like, I think Art Supply Buyer's Guide for painting, and I show, like, I think 10 different brands of paint, all the major brands that you can buy at most art supply stores, and the tubes of paint that I recommend that you get so that you can paint along and make exactly what I'm painting, right? So we're going to start off with a warm yellow, and I'm going to put a little bit of water in here just to dilute it, so this will help speed up the drying time of the paint, since we're trying ideally to get these paintings done in a reasonable length of time. So the water will kind of just help speed that along, because it's going to make the paint thinner, and when it's thinner it spreads out a little bit more, as we're about to do, and just facilitates this process. So let's move that out of the way. We'll start with this one. So I'm going to brush this warm yellow all over the canvas, as I mostly do typically these days. I have used other colors. I would imagine she probably would have either painted on a white surface or one that might have had a bit more red or brown in it. So this is not exactly how she worked, but this is this is just also a little bit of my personal idiosyncratic way of painting. I really like the effect that yellow paint has when we apply it as a wash underneath everything. So ultimately it probably won't be consciously visible to people, but it's going to affect the subsequent layers of color that we have painted over top of it. Now there's going to be a lot of texture over top of this, so I wouldn't worry about any kind of streaks or anything like that on the painting. You won't even see it later on here. We're going to put a lot of paint on these canvases, so make sure you got your painting clothes on, where we could get a little bit messy. Your fingers are going to get messy, absolutely. Look at how clean these hands are now. They're going to get dirty. And you know, that's also another contribution she has here. Like, her painting is using this great deal of texture. It would have been, you know, there's just like nothing like it in at least as far as I know, and I'll admit to not being, you know, an expert on Pakistani art history and the, you know, the arts, the classical art of that culture, but just from what I've seen over the years, it's mostly known for like really highly detailed imagery. So it's just very, you know, obviously, you know, when we look at a painting like that, there is detail in the texture, but like, for instance, we cannot see people's faces, right? We cannot see if people are holding something in their hands. We can't see birds in the sky. We don't really know exactly, you know, like, you know, if there is signage on these walls, etc., right? So there's detail, obviously, in the paint, but not in the content of here, right? So anyway, let's I'm gonna blow dry both of these to speed up the painting process. I'm just gonna wipe off that excess paint and then put my paintbrush into the water. Okay, so I'm gonna just put these side by side here. Get my blow dryer out. I'm gonna mute the microphone so it's not so loud and blow out your speaker. Okay, so now these are almost entirely dry. They're going to dry a little bit as we start mixing some paint here shortly. So, as I said, we are going to be using palette. Well, we're probably not going to use all of these, but I just want to quickly show you some of the different tools that are available to you. So you can see here's some different sizes of palette knives. We have, these ones are made of well, I'm not sure what this is, tin or aluminum or something. And then we have these ones are made of plastic. The main difference between palette knives is the flexibility in the thickness of the palette knife, and then obviously the shape of the palette knife. So this one is like really thick and quite stiff. It's not going to bend so much, right? So this would be pretty good for doing nice sharp lines, right? Versus something like this, which is much more flexible, is great for doing kind of maybe some smaller details. In fact, let me just show this kind of a view, right? So we have something really flexible versus this one. Right, doesn't flex nearly as much. And then of course you got some small pointy ones with a fairly pointy tip, right, that you could use to kind of get very small details. Right, I think this one's still pretty stiff. And then you have these ones here, and usually they're fairly flexible. You can get some that are super flexible. Those pretty stiff. Pretty stiff. I think this one is my most flexible metal one. Right. So traditionally you would use this on your palette for mixing color. Right. You put color down, and then you scrape it, and you can mix with it. So it is pretty revolutionary to use these tools for making a painting. She wasn't the first artist in history to use the palette knife as a tool for actually painting on canvas. There are many examples. Even probably the earliest artist would be Courbet, a French artist. I would think off the top of my head, she was. I'm pretty sure she was the first one in Pakistan to do that. Okay, so now I'm going to load up the palette here with some color. Now, we're going to do a few fun things with today's painting. We may take some of this paint and put it directly onto the canvas. And I mean literally squeezing paint onto the painting itself before it even gets to the palette. So we'll do a little bit of that, but I think we'll start out a little bit slow so we don't kind of freak everybody out. Because maybe that might feel a little bit like jumping off the deep end for some folks, right? Okay. So we'll put some white on here as well. Great. So again, if you're wondering what these colors are that I put down on here, what's most important to know is that I'm using 2 yellows, 2 reds, and 2 blues, right? So that we have a warm yellow and a cool yellow, a warm red and a cool red, a warm blue and a cool blue. So 2 of each so-called primary colors, right? And the reason why we use a warm and a cool is because warm colors want to come forward, right? They advance towards us, whereas cool colors seem to recede. They go into the background. So in order to create depth in your painting, we want to use warm and cool colors to help create space, right? By putting the warm colors in the foreground, like in this case, Sufi Waqar, right? So we're going to put warmer colors, the warmer blues on his jeans whenever possible. And then we're going to put colder colors in the background to help create space and to push his body forward so that it's not competing with the background space, right? And we do see there is a little bit of cool blue in his clothing, but that's okay. It's okay to have some cool colors in the foreground, and it really is going to help by having this warm yellow here. That way, if we do paint cool colors on top of this, it's still the warm yellow is going to sort of lift it up. It's like it's going to help float that boat. Okay. So let's look at the painting itself again and just think about how we want to approach this. Usually what I do is I work from the background to the foreground. So usually I try to add all the color I can in the background before I move on to the foreground here. So for our background, we're going to want to use our cool yellow. In fact, let's get both of these up on the screen. We're going to want to use cool yellows here, and some cool blues back in here, and cool greens, and cool browns. And then when we get to the foreground, we're going to use some warm reds, and warm oranges, and warm browns, and warm blues. Okay, so let's start with the background. And let's, which palette knife should I take? Oh, you know, you can do today's painting with a paintbrush, no problem. You don't have to use a palette knife to make these paintings. I was just thinking in my mind, should we do one with a paintbrush, one with... I'm going to do them both with a palette knife, because that's what she would have used. But if you don't have a palette knife, you can also just use, you know, like... I think this would be a little bit tricky. I could try using like a spoon. You would get pretty close to that, or even the other side. Really what you want is a flat shape. So I've done this before using pieces of cardboard, and it works okay, but I haven't used that kind of thing for a more detailed figurative image. I suppose another thing you could use would be like a popsicle stick. The one thing with a popsicle stick is it doesn't really flex very well. So you want something that's got a little bit more flexibility in it. And I'm trying to look around the studio, see if I have anything I could transform. I don't think off the top of my head. Anyway, so we're going to move on and do the best you can with the tools you have. So let's dive in a bit here. Maybe not that far quite yet. Okay, so let's mix this cool color in the background. So we're going to take some cool yellow and some cool blue. Okay. Now let's just, we're going to need a lot more of this paint, but let's just start here. I'm not going to get it too mixed in. I'm going to take that color and start applying it onto the canvas. All right. In fact, we're going to do this again. And here we can just, rather than mixing it all perfectly, we'll take it right out. And start painting it onto the painting like that. Now I know you're saying like, well, Michael, you got the colors all wrong. Painting this way, we are going to be mixing colors directly onto the canvas. So don't worry about getting the colors totally right off the bat. The next thing I'm going to do that I want to introduce here is some heavy gel. So heavy gel is a material that you can mix into your paints to get more texture. So let's take a scoop of this heavy gel. You can see, right, it's really thick. And the great thing with this is when it dries, it's going to stay thick. Because what happens with a lot of acrylic paint is after it dries, it might have like a lot of texture to it, but when it dries, it kind of just collapses and is fairly thin. This is going to keep it really textured. So I'm going to mix that into my paint here. And in fact, let's just take some scoops of this, and we're going to put this into paint going forward. We'll use a bunch of it. Okay, so I'm going to mix that into my paint, and that's going to really give this painting a lot of texture. It makes me really excited to use that. Okay, so the other thing, we're going to end up using a lot of paint today, which I think is really exciting, but I can imagine it can be a little scary. For some people, it's going to make these a little bit more expensive, these paintings. So, let's see, what color should we do next? We've got these in place. Why don't we take some of this yellow and mix it up into this heavy gel. Now, it looks like I've mixed a bit of white into here. When it dries, it should go back to its previous color, so it'll look maybe more like that. But it's just because there's so much texture in it, or so much of that gel, which has a white cast when it's wet. Alright, so we can spread this around. Look how thick that paint is. Like, here, let's and come into here. So this next color, actually, let's zoom back out. I want to get a little bit of this gray in here, and to get that gray, what we're going to do is we're going to mix some of this yellow, mix some of this blue. We're going to need more of both of them here. So we're going to take this blue, let's get some of that medium in that mixture. I'm going to jump all the way across the palette, and if you want, you can also clean this right off. Alright, so the idea is you can do that and then just wipe it clean. Right, nice and clean. That way you won't contaminate the other colors that are already there. So I can take that and then take some red. Alright, so this is my warm red. And then let's just mix this in together. Look at that goopy color. Goopy, kind of purpley brown. Grayish. I'm also going to take just a bit of white and mix it in here. Okay. So let's take a look at this painting again, and we'll put this darker color back here. We can mix some of these together. do the same down here. Okay. So look at how thick that texture is. Isn't that fun? Okay, maybe I'll even bring a bit more. The cool thing with painting this thick is it's going to take a while for it to dry. It's probably going to take a couple of hours at least the way that the thickness that I have applied it. So, which can be good or bad depending on your the way that you feel about acrylic paint. For some people, they love the fact that acrylic paint dries very quickly. Because unlike oil paint, which can take months to dry, acrylic paint can be dry in 2 minutes. Like you saw this, we painted it, put a little bit of hot air on it, and it was dry in 2 minutes, right? Now, by putting all of this gel in there and painting so thick, it's going to make this painting take, you know, as I said, overnight for it to dry, which makes it a lot more like oil paint. That means this paint, because it's still wet, I can mix other colors into it while it's still wet, right? Which, again, is a good thing or a bad thing, depending on your perspective. Let's keep on moving here, and we're going to mix some white into... In fact, let's just take a little bit of white, right? We'll take a little bit of white from our palette, and let's just take it, and we can mix a bit of that into the painting back there, right? Because that's the shadow behind him. I'm probably going to have to add a little bit of this green. So let's do a bit of that too. Okay. So we're gonna mix more colors in here. Let's just get this painting started. What else can we do on the ground here? I'm gonna add more white into this mixture. Now let's just zoom right in. On this area here. Okay. Let's take a bit more of the, let's take some more of this cold paint. I'm going to take a bit more, take a bit of the warm blue and put that in here to this mixture. And right here. Now, if it's too dark, as it is a little bit right now, it's okay. We'll let it dry a little bit, and we'll maybe even we can use the hairdryer. It's not going to have super big effect, but it will help speed things up. It's the one thing I'll just mention is if things are too dark, you're going to have to add a lot of extra paint on it to brighten that particular area back up. But let's zoom back out so I can see more of the painting. Okay. So I like when my palette knife starts to get a little bit dirty. I'm gonna take a bit of this warm red here. We can just sort of mix it into a bit of these colors. Okay. I'm noticing other little shadows under here that I want to take care of. I'll probably will redo her signature later on. Okay, so again, I'm just going to wipe off any excess here while I think about my next step. I'm going to mix these, actually this color that's here is not too dissimilar from the color on his face. So, you know, let's just say right off the top here, this face, there's a lot of detail on that face, you know, his eyebrows, his eyes, the fingers. When we're painting with the palette knife, right, even if I'm using my smaller one here, it's going to be really tricky to do some of those details. The version that she did of this painting, let's just see here. This painting originally was 90 by 59 inches. Or 60 inches, right? Which is 35 by 23 inches. So if you keep in mind that this is a 9 by 12, that means you can fit at least, you can fit this painting, come on, oops. So you could fit this painting it's about 4 times the size of the canvas I'm working on right now. So there's a lot more room for her to get some of those small details into the picture. Okay, time to take a sip of tea. So I'm pretty satisfied we've got a good start on the background. Now what I want to do is let's move into the foreground and let's get some color on his face here. So to do that, I'm gonna need a little bit more warm red. So we're going to take some warm red, mostly warm yellow. So maybe actually we'll mix this right up here. Let's mix some warm yellow and put this mixture in here. Whoa, that's so goopy. Oh, I love it. I love it when it gets goopy like that. Like, look at that. And that, when it dries, it's going to look basically like that. Right? If I just left this palette knife sitting on the table, it would dry into a glob like that, which is just so exciting. Let's look at the painting and think, is there anywhere we can use this color? It doesn't quite look like it. But if we add a little bit, yeah, let's take a little bit of this blue and mix this in here. That was even a little bit much. Now I gotta add a little bit more red to it. Now we got a brown. Okay. So this brown, we can use, I'll use this brown pretty much for, let's put it on the chair. I know it's not quite as dark as what we want on the chair, but we can darken it as we go here. So let's take some of this. Okay. Let's the arm of the chair here. One of the things that you're gonna have to just accept when you're painting with a palette knife, at least when you get started, is you have to give up a lot of control. There's no way to do that, like, at least at first, because you can slowly if you practice with the palette knife, you can get really good. As I said, there are a few masters who completely mastered the palette knife. But for most of us, it's a little bit tricky, right? So that we're gonna make that darker shortly. I just want to get. I guess this was. Okay. just going to wipe some of that off. I'm going to take, actually, let's do that again. I'm going to put some big globs of it here, and then just take some white and just mix it into the globs. Kind of mix the shadows a bit into there. Well, even, you know, this paint is kind of wet and goopy, so I'm going to scoop it out like that and put a bit of it down here to integrate it a bit. I'll do a bit of that later on. Okay. I think we need... Actually, let's do the flesh and the brown on his shoes, etc. So let's get the shoes in. I'm just going to take this... Actually, I'll make that a purple. So let me think about that in a second. Can I move on? You know what? I'm gonna take this brown as it is. Or, you know, I'm going to put a bit of white into it. Also going to add a bit more red in there. Let's do his arms. You're like, oh my goodness, we just lost all the detail on that arm. What was the point of doing all of that drawing at the beginning? Ugh, what a mess. All is lost. Don't worry. Okay, there's feet. Scoop up a bunch more paint. And let's put this right in the face. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, we've just lost it all. Oh no. What are we gonna do? I think this is fun. Now it becomes just, it's gonna look pretty abstract for a little while. So we'll just embrace that, let that happen. Okay. And while that's there, I think I'm going to let that dry actually just for a few minutes. Let me think of other places where I could use that same color. Maybe that's good for right now. So again, I'll just wipe off this extra, because I'd rather have this paint on my palette than on my cloth like I'm doing right here, right? Clean off the palette knife. Another great thing with using your palette knife is you barely need any water. It's a very easy thing to clean, right? I mean, sometimes the paint will build up into this area, and you can just get a little bit of water on it and take a clean rag and just kind of get right in there and clean it off, right? Just as you would, you know, a dirty fork in your kitchen. Okay. What's next here? I think let's move on to the foreground, and let's do his jeans. So we haven't touched that yet, so let's we got all of this here. Let's just take this blue. You can see a palette knife can be kind of, it's sometimes hard to get into kind of corners at times, you know, especially kind of rounded corners. Okay, now that color on its own is great, but it doesn't really appear, you know, if I hold that up directly in too many places on this painting. So, although, you know what, let's put it at a few places. We're gonna do it like she would, which is to allow as much mixing on the canvas as possible. Alright, so those are some pretty big globs of blue, right? So now we need to integrate them. Let's get... what should we do? Let's add some white to this first. So a little bit of highlights on here. Okay, I'm just going to go a little bit wild here, and I'm going to do what she would have done, is take some paint, and I'm going to squeeze it right out onto the canvas. So I'll get darker back in there. Okay, we're gonna put some shadows and things on here shortly. Okay, I love that. Oh, it's so exciting to paint this way. It's so different than what I normally do. So it's so fun just to jump in off the deep end and do something totally different. Okay, so before we go dark, let's get the purple of these shoes. Just gonna wipe off my palette knife. I need a little bit more warm blue. Also, the way that I'm painting is I'm trying to think like a few steps ahead and think, okay, if I can use this color now, and then later on I can add more colors to it to darken it. That's why I'm using this. I'm going to mix purple for these shoes. In fact, let's do this right here. And then later we're going to convert this same color into our a dark warm color. So let's we'll use a little bit more of this gel medium. It's pretty hard when you're using a lot of paint like this to not get your fingers dirty. So if you're painting along with me and you're using palette knives just like this, you're probably like, where did that paint, you know, like there's just paint just starts showing up all over your hands in different places, right? So let's mix this in. So we've got our warm blue and cold red, and together we're going to make a purple. Ooh, it's such a delicious color. It sounds great too, all mushy and goopy. Okay. So I'm gonna put this. Okay, one shoe. So what I'm doing is mostly I'm looking for what we call like the local color, the kind of color untainted by shadow and highlights, by light. So this might not be the exact local color, but it's close enough that when I go in and modify it, I'll have kind of, I can brighten it up and darken it. Let's see if there's anywhere else I could use this purple. I might take a bit of it. I'm going to take even more of it here and put it down right here in the background here. Okay. And we're going to use that as a darkening agent here shortly. What else needs to be... Actually... Yeah, we'll use that. We'll mix it for the hair. I think I want a warm green now. So I'm going to just clean my palette knife. And we're going to keep that our flesh color. So I'm just going to put some more paint on the palette here. I'm going to mix it in here. It's maybe a little confusing because we've got some cool yellow in here. Okay. So this is a warm green. Okay. Oh, I didn't put any gel medium. Let's put a bit of that in there right now, just to give it some texture. I'm just going to do a quick little, just integrating some of these marks into what we have already. Because we do want our warmer colors in the foreground. So I used some of this cool colors in the background previously. Just want to make sure got lots of color, warm colors in the foreground. Put a bit of it here in the background. A bit. Oh yeah, I want. That would be a bit. Well. Okay, so let's make a brown, or a darker, yeah, we'll make it a brown, a warm brown. So let's take this warm red. Yeah, we're gonna need a bunch of it, so let's just get more paint on here. So you can see what we have here. We've got warm red, warm yellow, and warm blue, right? So we're going to mix these together. And we're going to a dark, warm brown. Okay, let's take this. I'm just using it to create some shadow. Why don't we zoom in for a few minutes here as we get some of this done here. Let's zoom in. So I'm taking this darker brown, so it's funny too, when she originally took that position at the department, or when she basically created the Department of Fine Arts at the University of Punjab, the rules at the time stipulated that you weren't allowed to make sculpture. And it's interesting that her painting style at that time becomes very textured. I'm just speculating, but I just wonder if there was a desire on her part to do sculpture, but since it was not permitted, she decided to make highly textured paintings. Because there's an aspect of what I'm doing right now that feels very sculptural. Okay. I like just sort of taking some of the paint that's on the brush and just sort of, or on the palette, I guess, and just putting it in a few other places. To kind of integrate the rest of the painting a little bit more. Okay, let's finish the jeans maybe. Let's get a bit of a darker color. This might be the darkest color we'll make. In fact, it's similar to the cool blue here. Let's just move this out of the way again. Cool blue, warm red, and you know what? I'm going to put just a little bit of black in here. Probably can't even see it on there, but so now I'm going to just mix this up. So now we've got a really nice dark color, which we're going to use to do like a few highlights, like in the face, hair, shadows, etc. We're probably going to need a little bit more of this, but I'll probably prefer to mix it a second time. That way I got a little bit more variety and variation in that color. Maybe let's just go right down to the face. Let's just do that. Again, her painting is about four times the size of the painting that I'm working on here, 9 by 12. Hers was, if I recall again, was 35 by 23 inches. So much bigger. So there's a lot more space in her painting to do some of these details. Let's zoom in even more. Okay. Now, I should also say, one of the weird tricks of using a palette knife is it's a fine line between applying paint and scraping paint off. Because one of the traditional uses of a palette knife is if you don't like what you're doing, like I could literally take this palette knife, scrape all that paint off, and I'd have very little paint left on the, it would kind of, whatever sort of made it into the nooks and crannies of the weave of the canvas would stay there, but most of the rest would be gone. So let's see if we can use our small palette knife with a relatively small tip to do some detailing. Let's even that's a lot. Where should we start? Maybe get one of these eyes in. Okay, it's pretty tricky to get some of this in, but not bad, right? So it's just this constant sort of massaging of the painting. Let's go into his shirt here. He's got that a part in his hair. Do an ear there. Okay, I guess, but wow. Tricky, hey? Let's get into some of these shadows. So you can see why I put paint down first, big globs of paint, and then I can go around and I'm kind of pushing that paint around on the canvas, blending it in. Totally different process than really anything we've done thus far. Okay, let's move up a bit here. So I got this big gob of paint on there. Maybe too much. Okay. Okay, this is so much fun. Oh my, this maybe I'm gonna start painting like this more often. Let's get this. Share leg. Got his arm here. Got like a watch in there. That just turned into a big blob, didn't it? Let's see if I can scrape a bit of that up. Try it again. Let's scrape it up. Oops. Let some water just drip from the ice pack above. Darn it. I think it went onto the canvas now. That water is not going to have quite the same effect as it normally would. Normally it would dissolve and start creating a spot on here. I don't think that's going to quite happen. But because there's so much texture, it'll just sit there and slowly evaporate off the surface. But still not an ideal situation. Let's back up there. Whew! It is hot. Okay. Let's take some of our skin tone. That might be the best thing I'd be able to do. Let's go down to his legs here. some shadows on the shoes. Just remove that big glob of paint. Okay, so let's zoom back out and just take a look at where we are at. Sorry, I got a bunch of paint all over my keyboard. It's like, ah! Okay. There we go. The dangers of painting with and using your computer with wet fingers. I'm going to just darken the chair a little bit. Okay, actually I'll keep that. I'm just going to wipe it off. Okay. These ice bags here. Trying to keep this place cool. So, I'm looking at this and thinking, how much more work should I do, or even can I do to it? There's so much wet paint on here that it starts to become a little bit, the more and more paint that's on the palette, the trickier this becomes. But I'm going to take a bit of my cold yellow. In fact, I'm going to take some cold yellow and a bit of white. I'll show you here. Just come in. Now it's a little bit intense and bright right now, but we'll just blend some of it into the background. take a bit of my warm yellow. Take a bit more of that. So we're just sort of mixing this paint onto the onto the canvas directly. That was like a bit of, I want to bring that back up. Just remixing a little bit of that dark color that I used. Just want to get a bit of it into the background. Just taking the warm red, cool blue, and some black, as opposed to just black. Because black, I think, just on its own, just is too intense of a color and kind of kills everything off. I'm looking for this line back there. I don't know, like I might be pretty happy with this right now. I'm not sure how much more work I'm gonna do, because even though, you know, obviously there's more detail in the face that we could get, I'm just skeptical as to with the size of my canvas, etc. I don't know if I'll be able to really add much more detail. So I'm just trying to see if I can make this line up. Okay, I think I'm going to leave that. I think I'm, let's just position that. There is, I guess there is some highlights on his arms and stuff, isn't there? I kind of just want to, I like the spontaneity and intensity of what we have here, but I'm going to take a bit of white. Maybe mix this into our flesh tone. Painted that back a little bit. I just wasn't the biggest fan of it. Well, that's scraping it away, and I actually don't mind how that looks. Can I live with that? The scraping. It's a little bit different than what she did. Maybe let's see if we can just... so you can see. Oops, come on, let's go. I don't know. You know, I could be convinced that this is done. What's going on back here, Michael? This is... let's take a bit of this. Okay. So I think I'm gonna walk away from this. I feel happy. I feel really happy with it. I think I got paint all over my face. Oh, what did I do here? I didn't integrate that, did I? Just lighten. I will say it is starting to get surprisingly tacky. I think it's probably because this room is so hot right now that I am getting a little bit of the paint is drying, and even with all of that gel in it, it's drying faster than normal. Okay, I think that's good. I think that's more than good enough. So I'm just going to set this aside. I love how much texture's on that. Wow, I don't know if you can see as we bring it up. Like, look how thick some of that paint is. All right, that's cool. Okay, so let's tackle another one here. As I do this, I just think I'm going to wipe some of this paint off. I might keep a little bit. Let's just, well, yeah, let's keep the dirty palette. I kind of like dirty, working with a dirty palette. So, very different painting that we're going to work on next. So, where should we begin? We've got that purple on here already. That purple we can put in a bunch of places, although I think I want to start mostly in the background if possible. So let's mix up some color. You know what? I think I'm going to wash the palette. I'm going to start out by using this purple. This purple was just warm. Although do I want to use all of that? That's a lot. Yeah, let's put this. This purple was made with warm blue and cool red. I'm going to put a little bit thinner coats. Just kind of smudge it on. And we'll build up on top of it. Okay, let's take, so we're going to make a cold brown for this area up here. So let's start out, we'll put some cool red, some yellow, or cool yellow, sorry. And then let's take some gel medium as well. Now we'll use that. Let's get a clean palette knife off. Okay, so let's take, actually maybe we'll use this for a green to start. So we're using that heavy gel with some yellow. We're going to convert this into a brown shortly, but while we've got this paint already pre-mixed, let's just use it all over the place. So I'm just taking a bit more of the yellow that I had, putting that a bit of that more onto my palette. Okay, I'll get all the branches and leaves. I'll do that after I've got some paint in the sky. In fact, let's just jump around. I know this is not exactly the direction I was planning on going, but I'm going to take, let's put our cool, get some white, and we barely need any of cool blue for the sky. Let's take some more heavy gel. So we've got cool blue, heavy gel, and white. Let's mix the heavy gel and the white all up together first. It can be a little tricky when you're mixing gel into white, because it's usually most gels and additives appear white on their own. Now they usually dry clear, but I totally get it can feel a little bit tricky to see where the gel ends and the paint begins, right? Be careful with that getting too much blue in there. Oh, is this... It ends there. So let's just fill this with paint. We can organize it and put branches and all that stuff afterwards. Okay, maybe I'll put a little bit, even though I don't know if that's there, but just to give it a look of that light maybe poking through some of the leaves. What's back here? That's an archway or something. Let's get a bit of these reflections. I think this tree looks like it's been wrapped or something. I'm not sure. Okay. We're going to be adding more white to the foreground afterwards. Just going to throw a few of those there as a bit of almost like placeholders for myself. Okay, so let's move on to the building, I think. I think that's what I want to do next. We can do some of the brown and the branches, etc. What was I going to do? Oh, yeah. So let's take... We've got this green. We've got some cool red. I'm going to do this over here. That's going a bit... It's not quite the color I was expecting. It might be because I just made the mistake of mixing it in with like black, etc. So let's just mix that again. I can use that color elsewhere, so... Let's start it again. Let's take some cool red and cool yellow. Let's mix this together. Since we got a bit of green or the blue, really, it looks green, but that's blue and let's take that. I think just as it is. And man, doing the architecture like this is going to be tricky for me, but I'll do my best. Because architecture has a lot of details in it, right? So when you're doing architecture with a palette knife, even though you have this kind of built-in straight edge of your knife, I just noticed it's a little bit lighter back in there. This is a little bit darker. Let's take this. We're gonna have to mix that color again. Okay, I'm just gonna when I get to the end of my paint tubes, I use this device here. What's it called? A tube wringer. And you can take your tube of paint and you can put it, let's see, let's move this off to the side. Which way do I do this? See how now clear all that is. Oh, look at all that paint coming out. So this tube of paint where I couldn't squeeze anything out of, still lots of paint inside there. That little tube grinder I think costs, it's a little more expensive. Even though it's just a piece of metal, it costs maybe like 20-30 bucks, but if you end up saving a lot of paint because you're able to recycle that tube, it pays for itself pretty quick. Or if you're able to get like 2 or 3 extra paintings out of that tube of paint. That's great. Okay, so cool yellow, cool red. Making a brown, because there's also some cool blue in here. Let's take some white. Now this building has a bit more kind of reddish, orangey qualities, but I think I'm just going to start out like this, and then we'll get more detail as we go, or just some highlights. I'm just thinking I haven't used gel medium in here. Let's mix some gel medium in there. I am starting to run low on it. I still got lots of the painting to do, so one of those gel medium jars costs probably 20 bucks, and I've used maybe a third of it so far. So, you know, like I said earlier, this painting is not going to be a cheap painting. There's a lot of paint in this painting. It's too big of a glob. There's so big. So I'm stuck to it. Okay. Just added a bit of warm yellow into this mixture. Just want to get paint onto the surface here. This painting is also much larger. This painting is, again, another 2 or 4 to 5 times the size of the original. So, oops, missed a little bit. That's okay. Let's keep it like that. Just get all of these big globs of paint onto the surface so there's something chunky in there. Wow, there's a lot of paint on here. Pretty thick, goopy painting, which I love. I think it's fun to paint this way. Obviously lots of details still yet to come. We're not even anywhere near that. Remember, this is just like painting any other type of a painting. We still need to get like enough paint on here just to cover the surface. Where can I need to move this previous painting out of the way? Okay, let's, where should we move to next? I think I want a warm green. Okay, so I'm going to take my palette knife here, mix a bit of the warm blue into this green, and I'm going to put a bit of it in a few different places. That figure there. Remember, we want, whenever possible, warm colors in the foreground, cool colors in the background. So that's what I'm going for, trying to establish a bit of the color temperature relationships here to build some space into this picture. And obviously I know that these aren't exactly the right colors in all of the right places. It's not really important that I'm there yet. Okay. I'm going to take a bit of... I'm going to take some warm yellow, put a blop of it there in the middle of the canvas. Just my brown from before, plus that dark color that I had mixed previously. But right at the, I think it was one of the first colors I mixed. It looks like there's like a lot of muddy colors in this painting. So, and that's I think a feature of painting with the palette knife, is it's really hard to keep the saturated color. So as you work, you might be mixing some colors, and then rather than just throwing it onto a rag or into the garbage, you can mix it into other places, right? And I'm just sort of applying it all over the place. Let's see. how about this figure here? The figure there is, let's make another dark color. Cold blue, warm red, totally the opposite side of the color wheel from one another. We're going to make a nice dark color for us. Cold blue, warm red. Okay. So take some of that darker color, put it on the back of that tree. Okay. Let's do the, it looks like maybe some kind of, like a sari, I guess, that this woman is wearing. That looks like a warm red, so I need some warm red on my palette. Maybe I'll just put a little bit of warm red right onto the canvas there. Okay. There's some cool reds all over the place, so let's just put a bit of some cool red on our palette. Alright, so here's some cool red. Let's just get a bit of that on the palette. I think I'm just too zoomed in to see. Getting lost in the details, right? You need to kind of sometimes just be sitting out for a little while before we get into the details. So. Oh, that's... two different people here. We'll create a darker color there later. What else can we do? I think we want some more of this cool blue that she's using throughout. So let's do a little bit more white. And blue. Looks like this sort of goes down and back up a bit. Okay, once we start getting into the mixing of paint, it's going to be a lot of fun. Not quite just there yet, but I think you can start to kind of feel it coming on. Okay. I'll say, like, at the moment when I'm looking at this, it feels a little bit overwhelming. There's a lot of paint and a lot of details here that still need to be done. I can imagine some people, especially beginner artists, getting to this point being like, I don't know, bud, this is looking like a big hot mess. I think I mean, you could even take a break right here. If you got it to this point and you're like, okay, I feel like I've lost some of the details, take a break. You don't have to finish it all in one go. I am going to try to finish it here in the next hour or so. But if you could get it to this point, that would be great. So let's just, I'm going to take more of this. This is cool blue. That's a cool green in there. Just have a bit more greenish quality to it. There we go. There's a cool green and a warm green sort of side by side here. Bit of this kind of warmer, darker green underneath some of these trees. Taking the warm blue, mixing it into a few places. Okay. What should I do next here? I'm thinking to myself. I would probably feel really good if I could get a little bit, if I could add some definition to this building back here. So maybe let's do that. Okay. I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to mix a warm orange, and then we can use that to put some detailing. So put some warm yellow. Warm red. Okay, so I got warm red, warm yellow here. We can make this bright warm orange. Now the reason why I didn't apply this earlier directly into the background is I was worried it would go a little bit too cartoony with this really bright color. So I wanted to have something kind of underneath to just ground all of this in here. Now this color is going to mix a lot into this existing brown, which is exactly what I want. Okay. Let's keep on going down the side of this building. See, I'm not so crazy after all, right? This old man just might know what he's doing after all. I like to think so, anyway. It's getting, or some big globs of paint here. So there's not going to be a tremendous amount of detail in here. But as I keep saying, she's painting, her size of her canvas is much bigger than mine, so I'm doing the best I can, right? So here's kind of mostly warm red up top there, and then we'll do mostly warm yellow next to it. And before I wash my brush or not my brush, my palette knife before I clean any paint off. I just want to take any extra paint and just put it down here. Now typically that would be quite a dangerous move for a painter, because now it suggests the possibility that things could start getting pretty messy. But when we're painting a painting like this, it actually helps. It's going to give some definition here, because we're not really blending any of this paint too much, right? Paint is mostly just sort of going on and then paint next to it, and sometimes sort of erasing a little bit as we go. Okay, what should we do? Should we keep on working on this building? Yeah. So on this building, I think what I want to do next is... Actually, could we use this dark purpley color? I think we could. Let's use a bit of this to do the some shadows on this building. Again, this is only so much that we're going to be able to do with this painting, especially in the amount of time that I'm planning on devoting to it, but I'm pretty happy with the way things are turning out right now. Remember that I said there was potentially a point a little while ago where it could feel a little bit disheartening because things aren't, sort of look a little bit odd and unfamiliar. That's an okay place to be as an artist. Some artists would say that's exactly where you want to be, isn't you want to be in an unfamiliar place. The painting can transport you to new places. And new places can be scary, right? Okay. Let's keep on going backwards here. I'm not sure how much detail more I can get in this building. We'll see. It's probably a pretty good... I mean, I think for our purposes it's doing a pretty good job. Let's get some of this same orange. Putting a bit of that in the trees for now. And again, rather than wiping this off, let's just take some of this orange, put it down there. Okay, what should we do next? I'm feeling pretty good with where everything is here. Again, it gets a little confusing. So I think maybe we would benefit by doing a little bit of work down here. Let's take some of this cool blue. Build that out a bit. More cool blue there. There's some kind of cool blue up here, isn't there? Okay. So let's put some cold blue, I think, in the foreground and warm blue. So we'll kind of alternate a little bit, and we'll have some purples down there. So I'm going to put some, we're going to mix cold blue, warm blue, and some cool blue. So I'll show you what I'm doing here in a second. Okay, so, and actually use the, let's make a bit of more purple. And we'll need some white. So we're sort of using the flat bottom part of this tool. I think that's what I want to do, is get, now that I'm seeing the effect, just smudge a bunch of this cool purple in place here. This is the cool green that we basically applied in the leaves earlier. I'm just going to push it across here. Now I think I'm going to take some of this warm blue, even though she's using some cold blue in places. I feel like that cold blue might be just a little bit... Well, we'll try it. This isn't working as well as I was hoping, but... I'm taking some cool red. Okay. It's interesting, like when you're trying to recreate somebody's technique, it's a little bit of fumbling around, and then sometimes you get these little glimpses of like, ah, I bet you that's exactly what was going on here. It was mostly fumbling though. Now I just want to go to Pakistan and visit the school, university, and just see what it looks like. And I'm so intrigued. I mean, I'm sure there's Google images of it, but what's one of the fun things about making paintings of places is being in the place and seeing, you know, how closely or far away from the original you actually got. Here's some warm blue. Okay. There's no date on this painting, so I'm not exactly sure what point in her career this painting was made. If this was before or after men were allowed to go to these courses or join the program. So one wonders, are who's who in this picture? Do we have men and women, or all women, or all men? To me, these look like women wearing robes, like saris. And I apologize, I know saris are Indian, and India and Pakistan are nowhere near the same people and country, but that's I apologize for my ignorance and not knowing the proper terminology for the clothing. Okay. I think this fellow here, I want to lengthen his legs. See, I'm just sort of like tapping down. Maybe let's look for a different view here. I think we want a brown on his face. Do we have any brown left? Don't know why I scraped that away. I'll let that sit there for a second and think about what it's done. It's driving me crazy. Okay. For me, looking at the painting up that close is really too difficult. Like, I can't see when I'm painting this type of painting, it's almost like I need to be standing further away so I can kind of see it more like other people would see it, because when I'm got my nose in it, it just all turns into a blob and my eyes get crossed and I'm like, well, I don't know what I'm looking at. So I would suggest that's probably a good idea for anyone else trying to paint this painting, is to kind of alternate between being close and a little bit further away, close and further away. So I'm really happy with where I am. We're gonna darken some things, add maybe even a little bit of black onto his outfit, into the ground down here. It could be a little bit more colder blue, so let's take a bit of cold blue and do just that. I could also do a little bit of scraping some paint off down here. And like I said, rather than wiping all this off, I can kind of use it, blend it around in a few places. Bit of scraping paint off. What else do I need to do? Oh, obviously branches up in the trees here, obviously. Okay, so let's go to, let's start with a lighter brown. And where we got, okay, start taking a bit of darker color. I'm going to mix some of this darker leftover paint, mix it into my brown a little bit. Zip in just so you can see a little bit about how this works. Kind of bridging this gap here to the tree. I think it's this tree that those branches belong to, not sure. Okay. Let's get some cool green on here. And actually I think I'll just put a little bit more cool yellow in. A bit of warm red or warm yellow. there. Okay, let's zoom back out. Okay. Oh, I guess I could put lots more of that green up into these trees here. So I think part of my question to myself, as I'm working on this now, and as I'm getting a little bit closer to being done, is how much, like, when can I walk away? Like, when do I feel like I've got enough definition in here for it to be kind of comprehensible as an image? I think maybe at this time, I kind of want to darken her hair there. Okay, let's take a little bit of black, and we're going to mix black in and apply it very carefully into a few places. Let's get some brown into this black. So it just sort of dilutes it a little bit. It won't be quite as intense as it was right out of the tube. Just want to define this tree. So we'll get some of the black into this guy's legs because they were not dark enough. Okay. You know, before today, really, I did not have much confidence in my own ability to use the palette knife. I do feel like just practicing painting along with her has made me feel a lot more confident in my own ability using the palette knife as a material as a tool, which is really the point of all of these, right? That might have been a little that line doesn't exist in hers. That was a little, maybe a misstep. So let's see if we can scrape up some of it and put it elsewhere. So put a bit of cold red inside this building. That might be enough. Maybe do I want to do the opposite, do a little bit of highlighting, I think. Like on his shirt, he's got this guy. Okay. I do, you know, once this dries, like if I was to let this dry for an hour or overnight, it would be a really fun thing to go back in and rework a little bit. I just don't think I'm going to do that. I want to just brighten up that tree a little bit. Taking some warm yellow, a little bit of white, I guess it's a lot more orangey, isn't it? I need a bit more warm red. Do I have any more warm red? I gotta use a little. Just noticed these. Well, you know what I was gonna say, they're not really. I noticed that they're just a little bit shorter than they were in the original, but I think I might just leave it like that. I think even though I could fiddle with it a little bit more, I feel like I've gotten what I want out of this painting. Just sort of look at this level of texture on here. You can see how thick it is. Pretty thick painting, which is fun. Like it's really fun to do that kind of thing. Okay, now usually I sign the paintings at the end of each episode, but there's so much texture on here, I'm afraid that when I turn it over, I'm going to get my hands all over it. So I'm just going to let these dry side by side. Let's just take one last look at them together. Wow, I'm so glad I chose this incredible master to focus on today. These are really fun paintings to make. Like they are very challenging. Like these two paintings are some of my favorite that we've made so far. Do they really look like the originals? I do, you know, it's debatable. Let's see. Again, I don't know. I feel like I've captured the essence of her process, the texture, and you know, as I look at them, it makes me think about, you know, the atmosphere that these paintings were made in. Like I'm just speculating, but you know, if there was a sort of prohibition against using sculpture, I assume there was also prohibitions against other things. Using this very expressive and way of applying paint with the palette knife, this impressionist sort of quality of the technique and the color use, the vibrant color use, it makes me think that it would have given her a lot of leeway. That if someone was to say, "Oh, this is a painting of, you know, some revolutionary who's, you know, plotting against the government," you could say like, Oh, how do you see that in this? This is just a a mound of brushstrokes. It's almost abstract, right? So it's almost like a defense mechanism I could see. Now, that's totally speculating, but that was just, as I was painting, I was thinking, huh, if you were in a regime where, you know, there was the potential of getting in trouble by painting the wrong thing, having this impasto technique, which is thick paint, and painting in an abstracted manner would be a great way to kind of gird yourself against those particular kinds of criticisms. Anyway, I'm pretty happy with the way these turned out, everyone. So in a couple of days from now, we are going to do a feedback session where I'm going to look at your artwork and give you feedback. So I would love it if you were to upload your versions of these paintings or anything else you're working on right now, obviously painting related, not the new deck you're building in your backyard or whatever, and so that we can look at them and take and I can give you any feedback if that's something that interests you. So thanks for painting along with me. Please hit like and subscribe if you enjoyed the episode. If you want to leave a donation, there's a PayPal link down below. $1, $50. If you want to contribute via e-transfer or mail an actual physical check, contact me through the Facebook page or my website. Both of those links are in the descriptions below. Thanks again, everyone. We will see you guys in a couple of days. Happy painting. Enjoy the beginnings of your weekend. Okay, take care, everyone. Good day. Blah, 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 blah. Blah, blah. Goodbye. Good night.